King is arguing for is the next step in that journey, right? She argues at the beginning of her essay, she says, look, we live in a world that is in opposition to nature, right? Again, we live in this world with nature-culture dualism. If you think about a lot of rock climbers or mountaineers, they talk about conquering the mountain. If you take a look at some of the writings by Francis Bacon, he talks about nature being an unyielding bride, right? And it's the job of science to force nature to give up his goods, right? Again, nature is referred to as feminine, right? So if we put it together, right, we live in a culture that's in opposition to nature, but in that oppositional view, women are thought to be closer to nature than men, right? In fact, the word mother is just the Latin word matter, right? Matter, right? The physical world, right? So there has been this long-standing connection between the oppression of nature and the oppression of women, right? Nature was something to be owned and controlled and used in patriarchal thought, and the exact same stuff has happened with women. Women are going to be owned and controlled, and right, possessions, right? We still see some of the remnants of women as property in some of the cultural rituals we engage in, right? So when my wife and I were married, there was a point in the ceremony where her father gave her to me. Again, we no longer believe that women are property, at least I hope we don't, right? But that sort of view still survives in some of the rituals and the ways that we behave. And even further, when you want to own something, you put your name on it. So currently my wife has my last name. We, of course, didn't know this all at the time because we were young now, but who knows, right? So again, King argues that since we live in a culture that lives in opposition to nature and women are thought to be closer to nature than men, she claims that gives women a particular stake, right, in trying to end the domination of nature, in trying to heal the alienation between nature and the sort of human sort of mechanistic world. Riveting stuff, right? For me, this is really a robust claim because I think that sometimes on the left, different groups think that they're fighting for different things, and her suggestion is, look, folks, right, the environmental movement and the women's rights movement, the feminist movement, are not separate movements. They're one and the same because for the exact same reason our culture oppresses nature, that's why men oppress women, right? Fascinating stuff, right? Okay, so that's her first step. Read through her essay. She tries to demonstrate that connection. She says there is a connection between those two forms of oppression. The next part that's engaging and super interesting, I think, is she says, look, from there are three directions we could go. Once we recognize that there's this problem, three things we could do. The first thing first of all, whenever anybody says, hey, there's three options, you can pretty much figure they disagree with the first two and they're going to advocate for the third. Pretty common stuff, right? So the first option, she says, is, well, what we could do is we could just get rid of gender altogether. Again, this is the situation or the solution proposed by Keller, right, in the video just before this one. Make a move toward androgyny. So that's the first option. King argues, look, that's not going to work. It's a little too little, a little too late. So on her view, we have nature, culture, dualism. Over here in nature, that's where women are currently placed. Her argument, though, is if we move toward androgyny, all that's going to happen is women are going to leave what she calls eminence, their connectedness to nature, and they're going to move out and they're going to start participating in patriarchal culture. So remember that distinction we made between sex and gender, right? What we're talking about here is gender, right? Femininity and masculinity. So as women start to participate more and more in culture, they're probably not going to bring their femininity with them. They're probably going to start enacting a set of masculine traits. So if we go with that first solution, getting rid of gender ideology altogether, King argues that all that's going to do is it's going to have women shift, start participating in patriarchal culture, but do so with the exact form of behavior, right? They're still going to be living in opposition to nature, right? They're not going to bring those dare I call them the pink tools, right? They're not going to bring those with them, and those are the tools that we need. Those are the things that we're sort of after. Our second option is what I'm going to call gender pluralism. First of all, pluralism means that sometimes there's multiple ways to get a right answer, right? There's not just one. It's not subjectivity in that every single answer is right, but there's multiple ways to get the right answer. So gender pluralism says, look, we're going to have masculine, we're going to have feminine, we're going to keep gender, but neither is better than the other, right? They're different, but they're equal. It's kind of like two nickels and a dime, right? Same value, but different. So I might try to solve problems using a masculine approach. My wife might try to solve problems using a feminine approach. Which one's the right one? Gender pluralism says, heck, they're both right, they're just different. Okay, so King, though, says, look, that option ain't going to work either. It ain't going to work because, first of all, it does not address nature-culture dualism. It doesn't actually try to bring patriarchal culture back in context to the natural world of which we're part. Right? The other big problem with it is we've gone in history and we've done this separate but equal, right? Separate but equal. Well, I think what we've learned is separate but equal isn't, right? We can pretend that these differences don't matter as far as who gets power, who's more dominant, but the reality is these gender roles were specifically constructed by patriarchs as a way to keep male dominance in power. You may not want to think that. If you're a male, it may make you angry. We're not criticizing males, right? That's not what we're doing. Right? What we're doing is we're criticizing a pattern of behavior, right? We're criticizing this definition of masculinity. And again, the hope would be that maybe at some point we don't act masculine or feminine, we act human, right? Let's maybe go back to that if you're feeling a little uncomfortable with all this stuff King is presenting. The third option is what she calls ecofeminism. Again, in the text, read some of the principles of ecofeminism. I think that you'll find them fascinating. But she says, look, again, in this picture of nature-culture dualism, women are thought to be closer to nature than men are. So that she says we can use that as a vantage point to draw men back into the natural world, make them realize their eminence, their connectedness. To put this a different way, we've lived life now and interacted with our planet, with other countries, with each other, really using the blue tools, right? The blue tools have been sort of dominant for a very long time. At the time we used them, marginally successful. I mean, wow, our world is very different than it once was, but our world, it's much more comfortable. But she says, look, it's time to put those blue tools away for a while. What we need are those pink tools. We need things like good communication skills. We need nurturing, right? Maybe what we need to do is start mothering the environment around us. Maybe we need to partner with mountains that we climb rather than constantly trying to conquer and dominate. Maybe the language of conquering and dominance is, maybe we've done a bit too much of it. Maybe it's precisely because we've been taking this masculine view of nature. That nature at this point is lying at our feet, sort of almost lifeless and bleeding, right? Maybe we need to, again, be more nurturing, right, toward the natural world around us. Cool. So I think we now understand what her position is. Again, read more about ecofeminism. Really quickly, King, in responding to Keller, right? Or sorry, Keller, she's the reading before. She would say, look, this proposal, ecofeminism, she goes, no, that's not what we're after, right? She says the problem with ecofeminism is that, granted, it changes the nature of the bias in the sciences. We'd move from a blue bias to a pink bias, but Keller would say, what we don't, science works best when we have no bias at all. Right? So this claim that you're going to shift the bias and do it from a different bias, she says, it doesn't really help us. What we need is no bias. We need science to be, again, as objective as possible, open to as many different views as possible. Because, again, that's when science functions best. Cool. I hope you like both of their readings. I think, again, they're really provocative.